And I realized then that what I wanted to do if I was going to do pedals is I wanted them to stand out from everybody else so that if you held it up across the room, I'd know what it is.
Yeah. How you doing, everybody? This is the Best of the Week, guys. We're here with Adam from Satellite Amps out in San Diego, California. Adam, you make great stuff. Thank you so much for being with us. I can't believe we're still getting guests like you. And Steve, take it from there, bud.
Yeah, so Satellite, correct me if I'm wrong, but primarily an amplifier company, but you're also making some guitars and have made some pedals. How did it all get started? How did Satellite become a company?
Well, how it started was originally about, this is 1998, 99. I was in a Hawaiian band, which is a whole other story unto itself.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go back to that. So I'll do it as quick as I can to keep the story relatively short. But I had an antique and vintage clothing store. That's what I was doing as a business, and I had been a musician for most of my life. Also, just kind of side stuff and small things. And a friend of mine called me up and he said, "Hey, I'm starting a Hawaiian band. Do you want to be in it?" I said, "What do you need me to do?" But I need you to play ukulele. I said, "I don't know how to play ukulele." He said, "Doesn't matter." I said, "Okay, I'm in. This is great." And so we made a Hawaiian band called the Cheap Lays, and we did that for a number of years. And the lap steel player, the guy that wanted to start the whole thing, had really wanted what was called an Epiphone Console Grande. It was this 1939 Epiphone lap steel stand and amplifier. The legs came off and formed a case for the lap steel. Cool. The amplifier was in the stand. It was engineering genius. The problem is they only made 2 of them.
All right.
The chances of us finding one was pretty much nothing. The guitar player was a woodworker. I had dealt with some electronic repair and stuff from having the antiques, from fixing old radios and whatnot, and had a guy in town who was a restoration guy. And I talked to him and I said, "Listen, can we build this amplifier? I've always wanted to do something like this. I've done little projects, but nothing. I've never built an amplifier from scratch." And he said, "Sure, I'll help you." And so we did. So we built an amplifier. And we built 2 of them for the band, and I was hooked. I thought it was great. The clothing store antique stuff eventually fell apart, and I had some money and some time and nothing to do, and I went, you know what, I'm going to make an amp company. This is a great idea. And had enough money to make 25 amplifiers. And so that's what I did, and literally started made a prototype on an old Marshall chassis, and that was the first amp that we still make it. It's called the Neutron. It's made almost identical to that first thing. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy who was very integral to this named Ron Heathman, who was in a band called the Super Suckers. He passed away this past year. But he was a guy he was the first guy that ever got one of my amplifiers and was here, try this, see what you think. And he tried it and he liked it and he said, "This is great, except it's not loud enough." So I said, okay. So I went back and basically doubled the power output of it and made the Atom. Mm-hmm. And that was the how those first 2 models came out. And when I took that, I was literally driving down to a concert. Ron at the time lived in Seattle, but his band was playing in San Diego. I was driving down to drop it off to him, the prototype, and a buddy of mine called me up and said, "Come over to this place, come over to Selma Social Distortion's here. 2 Bags wants to see one of your amps." I said, "Okay." So I took a detour, went over and met Johnny 2 Bags, who's the other guitar player in Social Distortion, and he played it for all of about 2 minutes. We had security come over and told us to stop because we were being too loud. In classic punk rock fashion. And 2 Bags said, "Can I have this one?" I said, "No." He said, I need 2 of them." I said, "Okay." And so that was it. And I mean, it was just exploded from there. And then that evolved into, that was 2006, 2005, 2006. I have to look to see the exact day of when 2 Bags first started doing it. But he still plays. 2 Bags got number 3 and number 5, and he still plays number 3 and those 2. Number 5 we rebuilt and put into a nicer looking chassis and made it prettier. Number 1 is still in the ugly, originally made amplifier, and he won't let anybody touch it.
Nice.
I've been in it to change the tubes twice in the last. It is his concert used. He uses it for every show. He's watched me change the tubes. He won't let me touch anything or change anything else in it.
Awesome.
And I remember it was about 10 years in. He called me up. And he's like, "All right, we're going out on a tour. I think I'm going to play the other amp this time." I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, "Oh, I've never played the other amp. It's just there for backup." He had number 5, and it had been on the whole time. He never played through it in 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, and then he called me up and said, "This one sounds great, just like the other ones." Yeah, it does.
That's fantastic. I've noticed a lot of the guys that seem to play satellite amps, from what I've seen, tend to be in that punk rock world. Did that all kind of come from there?
Yes and no. So the pathway of artists from all of this. Another good friend of mine is a guy named Andrew McCaig, who lives in town now. He played with the President of the United States. He was also friends with Ron Tros, and he's also friends with this guy named Mike McCready. So Andrew kind of was, and Ron and Two Bags, those three guys, because Super Suckers and Social Distortion opened up for Pearl Jam for a couple of tours. So that got McCready to play them. That got Stone Gossard to play them. So that went down the Pearl Jam route of that. To back into a slight sidetrack, they're not all punk rock guys. It seems that, but that's part of because that's kind of the music I listen to more than others. But I listen to all kinds of stuff. Pearl Jam had asked for 2 amps to try out to see when they were doing the PJ20 tour to redo everything. And we were kind of left hanging. We didn't know. They were just testing them out. We didn't know if they were going to take them at all. I was doing an amp expo in Nashville, amp and guitar expo, and I had met a different guy named Night Bob, who is a whole other. We could talk about Night Bob for 2 hours. I love this guy. Night Bob is was Walter Becker's front of house guy and the tour manager for Steely Dan. Huh. He's a legend in the underground. If you know people that are the techs and the behind the scenes people of this, everybody knows Night Bob. General public, like my mom, has no idea who Night Bob is. That's fine. She doesn't need to. I love this guy. He's a great human being. So I met him at a different amp show, and we had talked about stuff. But so I'm at this Nashville Amp Expo. We're setting up our booth, our room, to show off. And I get this call from Night Bob. He's like, "All right, we're in Nashville too. Bring an amp. Sound check's at 4 o'clock." That's like, it's at 3:30 right now. Like, holy shit. Give me that amp right there. No, you guys, fuck this. Come with me. Get in the car. Let's go. So we just completely shit-canned the entire Nashville show. Hopped in the rental car. Booked over there. Because it's Steely Dan. Like, that's pretty big. And we get there, and soundcheck had just ended. They did it early. I was like, oh, crap. All right. Well, yeah, very nice to meet you. You know, got to introduce to Walter and Walter Becker, and you know, Night Bob goes, "Hold on, don't go anywhere. I'll be right back." All right. So we're just kind of sitting there, and about 5 minutes later, Walter comes back out with the entire band, and they take the amp and they put it on stage, and we get a 4-song sound check to ourselves of Steely Dan. Wow. That was pretty nice.
Yeah.
As I'm sitting in the audience, I get a text from Andrew of they loaded the amps on the Pearl Jam bus.
Wow, that's a pretty good day, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And talked to Walter, and he ended up he took the amp with, and then Walter died a couple years ago, 3 years ago. He was one of these guys that he was a patron, and he knew that he had the ability to help out a lot of smaller businesses like mine that he really liked, and so he would buy a lot of stuff, and but he would also use it. I mean, he took. When he died and they had the auction, he had even more stuff than I realized he had. But he always had at least 4 or 5 satellites out on tour with him all the time. Wow. He had a stack of them in his room, and he had 4 different practice rooms that he would go in, and there was always a stack of them, and he was always playing them. He always watched my website, and I had great fun talking to the guy. I would go see him. My wife's family's in Connecticut, so we go back to Connecticut twice a year and see them, and so I would take a day and go in the city and go hang out with Walter and Night Bob. Lots of fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. But we also have a huge variety. We've got Mark Ford playing our stuff, who's Black Crowes among other things.
Sure.
Matt I Salute, and also the Mark Ford band. Audley Freed, who's with Sheryl Crow. Mickey Raphael, who is Willie Nelson's harmonica player. We've got Counting Crows. Bush. There's a lot of other bands that are out there that are doing stuff. And I don't always do a great job in remembering who all is playing my stuff, but there are, and I'm very thankful to all of them, and I really do appreciate all that they've been able to allow me to do.
Yeah, that's great, impressive roster. So, you had alluded, so your early designs were based on early Marshall stuff, if I understood that correctly. How'd the other designs come about? Where's your inspiration come from there?
Okay, so the very first amps that were done for the Hawaiian band were actually direct copies, slightly modernized, but direct copies of an Epiphone Zephyr from 1939.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So that was the very first one, and that's the Nathan Daniels, who was Dan Electro, his design, and he was building them all with spare parts, so none of them were really the same, which was a whole interesting thing. So the Neutron that came out was it was a hybrid of a bunch of things, and it does have a little bit of Marshall in it, has a little bit of Tweed Deluxe in it, has some Vox in it, has some Selmer in it. So it's kind of a mismatch of 4 different schematics that I took and was just kind of staring at and going, all right, well, these are all kind of similar. Well, let's see how this does. And because I didn't really know, there was a lot of experimentation, trial and error on that first one of like, all right, well, I wonder if this is going to work. I don't like that. This is okay, but nah, all right, let's keep playing with this and part swapping and doing things. The Atom is a direct, they're brothers. If you look at the schematics, the preamp and the power amp, or the preamp and the phase inverter, the inputs, the controls are identical in both amplifiers. The power supply and the power section is doubled in the Atom. Mm-hmm. It's 2 extra power tubes, bigger transformers, bigger filter capacitors. But the amps are essentially, they really are brothers to each other. Mm-hmm. So the next amp that came out after that was the Omega, which is a 50 watt, because why not build a 50 watt amplifier? And that was its own complete separate entity that didn't really have its roots in anything. And that went through 3 different variations to what it is now. People liked the first one. I didn't like it as much because it was cleaner than my taste allowed. You really had to turn the thing up to maximum for me to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not a big master volume fan. So 50 watts at full volume, it's loud and it's not as usable and friendly for what most people are. From doing this for the last 16, 17 years, most of my customers are people that play at home. They play in small bands. They don't need more than 25, 30 watts.
How'd the pedals come into the fold with Satellite?
So the pedals were started off kind of as just a one-off. This is when I lived in the old house, and we were doing some stuff. I had just had a kid. And was trying to kind of do some things at home other than just in the shop so I could spend time with my newborn and stuff. Yeah. And so I built a fuzz pedal, and that was the first one, and I built a dozen of them. They're called Fuzzy Bunnies, and I haven't seen one of those probably in 12 years. But it was a fun exercise, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I didn't really know the pedal market. As I've gotten older, I've met a lot of pedal makers. I know a lot of them. A lot of them are good friends of mine. But as I've gotten older, my eyesight is not quite as good as it used to be. So if I'm standing up and I look down at a pedal board, a lot of times I see a bunch of colored rectangles and I can't tell what they are. They all look very similar to me, unless I put on my readers and I got to get down and I look like an old guy trying to read a pedal and, what is this thing that I don't know? So, I was never really that much into wanting to kind of do that same thing that everybody else had a really good foothold in to try and compete with my friends and stuff. I had a couple of ideas of things that I wanted to do though. So the Eradicator pedal, which came out, the original one was my friend Brad Davis, who is Creepy Fingers Effects. He's the bass player for Fu Manchu. Yeah. He lives about an hour away from me, so I see him fairly often too. Great guy. As he was building his stuff, he realized that the amps that he had to be testing on his benches, he didn't have just a regular Marshall to test it through. He said, listen, can you build me a preamp or something that's a Marshall preamp so I can test my stuff and see how they sound? I said, sure, no problem. So I built a single tube pedal with a power transformer. You plug it into the wall and everything. That is the most over-the-top, wound-up, insane pedal you could possibly do. It's one gain stage cascaded right into the other one. It's just mind-bogglingly stupid in what it does. It's great, but it was really done kind of for comic effects. Sure. Said it to him. He thought it was great. I thought it was funny. Andrew McKay, back to him, he saw one and he was like, this would be great for flying gigs because I can plug this into a PA system and it already sounds good. I don't have to worry about bringing an amp. And the presidents do a lot of flying gigs. They didn't really take a lot. They didn't want to take a lot of gear, so everything was either backlined or whatever they brought with them. And so it was this thing. I probably made 50 or 100 of them. I don't even really remember because I would just make them when people wanted them. I didn't really push it as a get into the pedal market thing.
Yeah.
So I made a run of pedals. We made 7 different ones that are all in these kind of triangular shaped giant boxes, and 3 of them have tubes in them. Yeah. And so occasionally we still do short runs of. I did one called the Sully pedal, which was a friend of mine, Mark Neal, who was a recording engineer guy I used to work for a long time. He gave me part of the old Ed Sullivan Show live console that they had when they would swap for the TV show, when they would swap the consoles out, about every 10 years, they'd put a whole new board in. And so they just took a Sawzall and they would just cut the thing in half and into the chunks and throw it away. And somehow he got a couple pieces of it. So we got an EQ section of it. So I took some of the transistors out of that and I made the Sully pedal, which is a clean boost, dirty boost pedal. And those ones we just used on little Hammond rectangular boxes because it was just a short run and that was it. If there's limited runs, it's more affordable for customers for us to do those.
Sure.
So I'm trying to also do that, but I like my big boxes.
Yeah.
We have another amp coming out. One of the things that we did, we have an amp called the Scamp, which is on a doesn't have a wood head box. It's got a metal cage over the top of it.
Yep.
We did that because I realized I can shave off a lot of money by having a folded metal box instead of wood.
Yeah.
So we, and the Scamp was the first amp I ever made as a price point amplifier. It was built purely to try and get, to reach a retail price point and still sound good.
Yeah.
So it's $850 retail, so $849. So we did it. I succeeded in that, and it sounds phenomenal. I'm really happy with it. The response we got to that made it so I put a couple of the other amps also on the metal enclosures. So we have there's a new one of those that's coming out. That's a whole other, again, smaller wattage design. That'll be under $1,000.
All right. So, P90 or humbucker?
P90.
I think I know the answer to this one, but master volume, yes or no?
No.
Rosewood or maple?
Rosewood.
Tweed Deluxe or Deluxe Reverb?
Tweed Deluxe.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Flying V or an Explorer?
Flying V.
Les Paul Jr. or Esquire?
Junior.
AC30 or Marshall Blues Breaker? My apologies.
That's all right. Probably both, but Blues Breaker if I had to choose one.
There you go. Boots or sneakers?
Boots.
Bigsby, yes or no?
No. Decorative purposes only.
There you go. And semi-hollow or full hollow?
Full hollow.
All right. That's all I had for you.
All right, then.
Adam, thank you so much for doing this, man. We really appreciate it.
I had a lot of fun. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and glad to do it.
What's the best thing you ever got off of Craigslist?
The best thing I got off of Craigslist was, so I was sitting in my shop waiting for a soldering iron to heat up, looking on my computer, and there's, looking on Craigslist, I see a thing that says estate sale, tube amplifier, $150. Oh, all right. And back when I did the antiques, I love estate sales. I love going to them. I love the hunt. I love the stories. I love the history of stuff. I'm like, all right. So a buddy of mine was there. He's like, I've never been to an estate sale. I'm like, I want to go. I'm like, okay, great. So I said, listen, I don't know if I can make it. Here's the money. If it's a tube amp, buy it. It doesn't matter what it is. $150, no problem. So I get a call from him, the next morning at like 7:30 in the morning. He's like, all right, I bought it. I just spent an extra $25. I'm like, but I put it all in the back of my CRX. I'm like, what do you mean you put all of it in the back of your CRX? And he sent me pictures of it, and it is a Western Electric 42C, which is a 5-watt amplifier that weighs 875 pounds in all of its components, and it was the first talking motion picture amplifier.
Wow.
I'm like, oh shit! Like I know what this is. This is awesome. I don't know how much this is, but Western Electric stuff is usually is expensive stuff, especially the old historical stuff. There's huge collectors of this stuff. So he brought it over to the shop, and we unpacked it, and I went back down there and found one more piece of it that was in there. And we were talking about it. It's like, all right, well, let's fire it up. I'm like, all right, we'll fire up part of it. So we fired up the rectification, and it's these giant, these things are 3 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet, 2 giant enclosures for the amplifiers to make 5 watts. This is very primitive technology of amplifier stuff. So we fired up the rectifiers and they all light up, and it's these gorgeous light bulb looking, like massive rectifiers, just a series of them, one after the other. Like, okay, this is great. Turns out they don't sound that great, but they're gorgeous to look at. And so we said, all right, well, what are we going to do with this? Like, I don't know. Let's put it on eBay and sell it. So we put it on eBay and sold it, and we put it up for $9.99. And in the first hour and a half, we were at 10 grand. And I started getting emails from people like, all right, well, what do you want for it? I'm like, I don't know. You can make me an offer, but I don't know. So it kind of topped out at about $15,000 for about 3 days. And we had this person call me up and said, can we come see it in person? Sure, come on over. They were local. And it was this woman who was from China, broken English, 2 of her friends that didn't speak English, and she FaceTimed her husband who was in Hong Kong for 3 hours going over the whole thing in Chinese. I have no idea what they said. And to make a really long story short, she handed me $35,000 and we packed it in her Honda and she drove away.
Yes.
Wow.
So that was my best Craigslist score.
Yeah,
Wow.
no doubt.
That's the best one I've ever heard. So you've got the trophy there.
That was a lovely phone call to make because, to call my wife and be like, hey, sold the radio, sold the amplifier, and you got $35,000.